Let's talk about 5 Eisner nominees that I'm rooting for this year. Welcome back to Comics Are Dope. I'm BJ Kicks, and this is another episode of Top 5, where I take 5 comic book related things and I rank them. Follow the playlist if you want to see more of these. Now, this week, today marks 1 week until the 2024 Eisner Awards, the 36th annual Eisner Awards. And if you're not familiar, the Eisner Awards are basically like the Grammys or the Oscars of comic books. So basically, there's a selection committee that goes through all the eligible comics or creators, and they nominate a few in quite a few different categories, and then comic pros vote on the winners for each. And so I've gone through the list of nominees, and I wanted to count down five nominees that I really, really am rooting for, and I hope they win in their respective categories. Now, if you're at San Diego Comic-Con, I don't know if you can just walk up and look and attend the Eisners. I don't know if there's a separate ticket or what, but it does go down on the Friday at San Diego Comic-Con. So cool thing to see. I know this year's ceremony is hosted by Phil Lamar, and this year's ceremony is hosted by Phil Lamar and Tom Lennon. So that would be cool to see Static Shock give out awards. But anyway, let's go ahead and look at the 5 nominees that I'm really excited for and hope they win. Of course, it wouldn't be me if I didn't have honorable mentions. So let's get 2 more out of the way real quick. First up, the award for Best Anthology. I am rooting for the writer W. Maxwell Prince. He is nominated for his book, Swan Songs. Now, Swan Songs is a book basically where I think it was a 5-issue limited series where each issue is a standalone and each issue details the swan song for something, the end of something, the end of the world, the end of a marriage, the end of a life, like just different things. Now, admittedly, I have not read Swan Songs, which is why it probably didn't make it higher on this list. I'm rooting for W. Maxwell Prince because my friend Skip and Tosh was a really big fan of his works. He had done Ha Ha and Ice Cream Man before this, and Ice Cream Man was like one of the biggest, or the books that Skip enjoyed most. For me, it was a little bit too horror leaning or kind of just sad a lot of the time. But what I can't deny is that it was a great, compelling storytelling in each issue. And I imagine that Swan Songs is the same thing. I'm going to check Swan Songs out. And I probably should do it sooner than later, especially if he wins the Eisner for Best Anthology. Another honorable mention that I'm rooting for, who's nominated for several categories, but it's Dan Mora. He's nominated for both the best penciler and the best cover artist at the Eisners. And quite honestly, I think he probably deserves both awards. Like, Dan Mora's art, it's always great. And he knocked out a ton of it. Batman, Superman, World's Finest. He was on Shazam. He was doing variant covers for a bunch of DC books. I think Nightwing probably being the most notable. And yeah, just when you see Dan Mora on art, it makes you pay attention. Right now, he's doing Absolute Power over at DC, and man, that book looks amazing. So anyway, Dan Mora for Best Penciler and Best Cover Artist at the 2024 Eisners. Now, let's get into my actual top 5 list. This is in no particular order, but these are the people that I'm really, really hoping win in their respective categories, starting with Best Limited Series, the creative duo I'm looking forward to or rooting for in this category is Christopher Priest with Carlo Pagulayan, who are nominated for their work on Superman Lost. This limited series was a 10-issue limited series from DC Comics in 2023, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's about basically Superman goes on a run-of-the-mill mission with the Justice League, and as a part of that mission, he has to kind of travel through a black hole and back. And he does do that. He goes through the black hole, comes back. It's like, I don't know, 20 minutes in his mind, but or in the real time. But in his mind, it had been 20 years. And so he experienced 20 years of just grief and stress and trauma, and he makes it through. And the book is about telling us what happened while he was lost at space, but also what Lois Lane does to try to bring him back mentally so that he can be present, not just as Superman, but as her husband, Clark. And man, really, really great series. It takes it to places that you wouldn't expect it to go. There's a twist toward the end of the series that's like, what? He did what? The dialogue is snappy. The story is really good. They play with a lot of things that Priest is just known for playing with, but the art by Carlo Pagulayan is just, I think Howard Porter fills in on a few issues as well, but it's just really, really, really good. It's top notch. This book deserves an oversized hardcover collection, but I think it's getting a trade paperback maybe next month, sometime later this year. But in my view, it probably is the best limited series, or at least it's what I'm hoping wins. And I don't think Priest has any Eisner Awards. This will be his first win. And for it to be for Superman would just be really cool. Next up, I'm rooting for, in the category of Best Graphic Album Reprint, the Hip Hop Family Tree Omnibus by Ed Piskor. I did an overview of the Hip Hop Family Tree Omnibus for channel sponsor Organic Price Books back when it came out, but it was a project that I was really, really excited for. Hip Hop Family Tree, if you're not familiar, is basically like a graphic retelling of the first 10 years or so of hip hop culture, starting in New York, but spreading to Philly and Atlanta and Miami and all these places. But it really details like the sort of superhero-like storytelling that we get when you talk about like the DJs at the birth, at the center of the birth of hip hop. So Kool Herc, Grandmaster Flash, and all of the et ceteras. You get a pretty good deep dive into like how Def Jam Records got started, and some of it's caricature or caricature. Some of it is just straight up history taken out of some popular hip hop studies books. Some of it is stuff that Ed Piskor actually interviewed 80s and 90s hip hop artists to understand better. And in my opinion, it's the work that put him on the map. It was this project that led him to getting the call for X-Men Grand Design over at Marvel. And, you know, cartoonist kayfabe and all the rest that came after all of that. Unfortunately, Ed Piskor did pass away earlier this year. So this would be his family accepting the award for him posthumously if he were to win. He did already win an Eisner for the second volume of Hip Hop Family Tree, but I really do think the omnibus puts it together in a way that's really, really good. Even though it's not treasury size, it's just oversized hardcover. You get a lot of extras, a lot of footnotes and annotations, a lot of pinups. Like, it was just a really, really well done collection with the foil cover and all that. And quite honestly, it was a book that was super important to me before Ed Piskor passed. And then now that he's gone, it's like, well, this is kind of the prized work from him for me. I know other people are fans of other works of his, but that's the one for me. And I hope it wins the Eisner because it really is a great collection of those single issues and treasury editions. So there's that. The next thing I'm rooting for in the category of Best Archival Collection or Project for Comic Books is the All Negro Comics 75th Anniversary Hardcover Edition. This is edited by Chris Robinson, who was an associate editor at Marvel Comics. He worked on a ton of stuff, X-Men, like he worked on a bunch of Marvel books. But one claim to fame of his is that he was the one who created the Marvel's Voices program. The first Marvel Voices anthology, which was really cool, like a spotlight for Black creators and characters at Marvel. And of course, after the pandemic, that that whole program really took off, and you see Marvel Voices and anthologies for all sorts of minorities all the time. Like at least on a quarterly basis, there's a new Marvel Voices program. So anyway, that's one of his claims to fame. But after he left Marvel, a project that had been sitting on his desk for a while was restoring and bringing back to publication All Negro Comics, which was the first comic book written and drawn and published by African Americans. And so it featured heroes like Ace Harlem and Lion Man, and Sugarfoot and Sugarfoot and Snake Oil, and just really it was a really interesting project. I did a whole video about All Negro Comics and the history of it and that collection, so you can watch that. But when Chris decided to bring it back to the public, he did a Kickstarter to celebrate the 75th anniversary of its original publication in 1947. And as part of that, there was a lot of sort of retouching, restoration. Those words aren't used interchangeably, and I can't remember which word he uses for it. I think remastering is what he would call it. But kind of updating things, not just straight up. Anyway, the best way to collect that story is in that hardcover collection. It's a public domain book. It's old. So you could get like a cheap reprint off of Amazon and stuff, but it won't look as good. It doesn't look as good as what you get from the All Negro Comics 75th Anniversary hardcover. That is still available at a few different stores. So I'll put a link to the website down below where you can call, see if you can get a copy for yourself. But I am hoping that that becomes an Eisner Award winning book. It's so important to the history of African Americans in comics, and it was a really well done project. So shout out to Chris Robinson for that. Next up, in the category of Best Comics Related Journalism, I am rooting for David Harper and his website, sketched.com. You might know David from his podcast Off Panel. You may also know that he was on an episode of Comics Are Dope, the podcast, just about a month ago. So you can listen to that episode. But David, in my opinion, is the best journalist in comics. Like, for people that do what I do, like interviewing creators and just trying to tell the story of comics, like record the history, kind of build an archive for people to look back on, David does it really well, and he does it at an incredibly high clip. Like, he puts out so many articles, and they range from just like editorial and opinion pieces to like verbal histories, like the origin of the Pizza Hut Marvel Comics collaboration or Ninja Turtles collaboration, like just crazy, crazy stuff. Pizza Hut and X-Men. This is a copy of the Sketched book 2023, just a collection of articles that David wrote. But I don't think there's anyone that's like documenting comic history and having conversations about the medium like David. And so for his blog and podcast to win this award would just mean a lot to me. I assume it means a lot more to him. So shout out to David and sketched.com. And finally, the last person I'm rooting for this year's Eisners in the category of Best Writer/Artist is Daniel Warren Johnson. He's nominated for Transformers. Now, in my opinion, Do a Powerbomb is probably the better work to nominate him for. And I don't know if that was nominated in last year's Eisners because it kind of started in 2022 and ended in 2023. But either way, Daniel Warren Johnson like is deserving of any award he's nominated for. Like, there are not a lot of people that can write a story as heartfelt as he writes with like the kinetic action and artwork that he gives to it. The fact that he's drawing it and he's writing it. I mean, you've seen him on stuff like Murder Falcon and Extremity. He did Do a Powerbomb, which was one of my favorite titles last year. And Transformers, while I will admit, is not for me, is not as high on the list as Do a Powerbomb. That's just because I don't have Transformers nostalgia. The heart and everything that you love Daniel Warren Johnson for is still in that book. And so for that reason, I hope he wins the Best Writer Artist. You know, I might be biased because I'm a big fan, and he was super gracious to me when I met him at Heroes Con this year. But whatever, he can do no wrong in my eyes unless he does wrong. But he's not, because he's Daniel Warren Johnson. And I hope he wins Best Writer Artist at this year's Eisner Awards. Now, the full list of Eisner Award nominees is available at comiccon.org. So you can check out the list for yourself and decide who you are rooting for. The voting period has ended, and I'm assuming if you were eligible to vote, you already knew that. So a lot of people nominated. Tom King's nominated. Tom Taylor's nominated. Joshua Williamson's nominated. Kelly Thompson. There are a lot of people nominated for Eisners. In fact, I hope that Mark Waid wins Best Writer for Shazam, just because, in World's Finest, just because Mark Waid has been sort of out of comics or out of superhero comics for a long time, and the way he came back, he made a splash. So there we go. Of course, I made it a top 8 list and not a top 5, but that's who I'm rooting for. Let me know who you're rooting for in the comments down below, and we'll see who wins a week from now. Till then, stay safe, stay awesome, and read something dope today. Peace.